What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a deep dive and the reveal of the number 19 team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings, the Detroit Lions. And this is a team that the ESPN's NFL networks are not going to spend a lot of time talking about. You're not going to hear about this team a lot on the podcasts out there. But this is why I love doing this series so much, is these Lions coming in here at 19 are a very relevant football team, a team that every NFL fan should know a little more about, and we're going to dive into them and really talk about what this team is all about. So if you enjoy the video, if you learned something, please do hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support this channel and share the video. Also subscribe so you don't miss any more deep dive power ranking reveals as we go. Lastly, if you're shopping for tickets, use promo code FranchiseGuy on SeatGeek. You'll save $20 and you get the best prices there anyway, so go check that out. If you're new to the series, what we do is we go through the roster, we rank each position, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So while it is a video game, they are my own ratings and they accurately show how I perceive each player. And it's just a nice graphic to use as we put these videos together. Then we go through the schedule game by game, talk about this team's over-under and my win total expectations for this team. And of course, now that we're into the top 20, we need to start talking about playoff expectations, what these teams need to do to be relevant in January. So the Lions here coming in here at 19th. ESPN has them 24th, NFL at 19th. So I'm not going to say I'm necessarily high on this team, but this is a team that many people just aren't really talking about. And it's also a team that I think by the end of last season actually really kind of came into their own and started showing more of an identity under Matt Patricia and this team. And you look back on this team last year, I'm not going to say Matt Patricia was a laughingstock, but there was a lot of talk about the team not really buying into Matt Patricia. He's just kind of this guy that, learned from Bill Belichick and had success in New England with all the stuff there, and he came in and was kind of trying to do the same thing, and people weren't really buying in. And then the season started, and a lot of the same conversations were being had. But as the season went on, their season was done. But the defense really started to buy into this scheme. You saw some players really step up in this scheme. And I think the team really has bought into what Matt Patricia has to offer heading into next year. And I think a lot of that actually stems from what they were able to do against the Rams. And, it was, I think, week 13, was it? The Rams came to Detroit and they were just rolling, right? No one could figure out how to stop this Sean McVay play-action-oriented offense. Well, Matt Patricia came up with this idea that, we're going to have a really dominant defensive line, and we're going to dare you to run the ball on that, but we're going to have our linebackers and our secondary really just, ignore the run and stay deep and cover these deep crossing routes and all this stuff. And it worked to a, almost perfection. And Bill Belichick himself, credited Matt Patricia for this game plan, for why they were able to have so much success against the Rams in the Super Bowl. So, a lot of that has kind of, I think, built up some momentum here for this team. The players have kind of seen, okay, this Matt Patricia guy actually kind of knows what he's talking about. He may have actually had a say in New England and a lot of the defensive success they've had there. You've also got some exciting additions this offseason, so this team does actually have some good momentum heading into next year, which I don't know if you could really say that about last year coming off a new hire. So they've got a bit of an identity here with the defense, something that's going to continue to grow as this goes on. But then on offense, this team was just terrible last year. It was almost inexplicable. So let's just use that as a transition here to go into the roster and start talking about this offense, and can they become more of a unit that supports this defense, unlike what we saw last year. And it really does all start with Matthew Stafford, who is going to come in here tied for 13th at quarterback. Now, based on his film last year and his stats, if you put any weight in his statistics, box score chasers, but based on his film, you can't really make an argument for him as a top 13 quarterback last season. But he has earned a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. You look back in 2016, he was in the conversation for a top 5 MVP candidate. I don't know if he was truly earning any votes, but he was really a solid quarterback in 2016, and a guy that showed that he can elevate the play of some of these guys around him and honestly carry this offense at times. So you hope he can get back to some of that. I think he has a little bit of a bad rap as a poor decision maker, a guy that lacks processing and accuracy based off of his time when it was just him and Calvin Johnson. And I actually gave Stafford a lot of credit for really evolving his game once Calvin Johnson surprisingly retired here. Stafford, in a hurry, had to kind of learn how to read defenses better, make better decisions, and not just have that safety blanket. So he did develop his game in that way, but now he's kind of got that safety blanket in Kenny Golladay again. So it's kind of intriguing to see how this later half of his career is going to look. So I think he will, with some improvements here, a new offensive coordinator. A lot of Lions fans would point to terrible play calling here. That's the scapegoat for pretty much every team that has a bad offense. You just point to the offensive coordinator because you don't want to call it the player's fault. Well, I think a lot of last year did fall on Matthew Stafford simply not being very good last year. And, maybe a lot of that could just be centered around what happened with his wife having a brain tumor. That's not an easy thing to deal with. So, maybe that could have played into it. Who knows? It's a little hard to stay up at night watching film when you're worried about your loved ones. So, I do expect a bounce back season from Matthew Stafford this year. I don't think he'll ever get into that top 10 elite conversation, especially with young guys like Baker and Deshaun Watson, and we'll see what like Darnold and Kyler can offer. I don't think Stafford will ever get into that top 10 conversation again, but we've certainly seen worse quarterbacks win Super Bowls than Matt Stafford. And the last thing I need to say is that he signed his contract extension several years ago. And you might look at that now and still say, okay, he's like a $29 million cap hit right now. Well, this is very quickly going to turn into a team-friendly contract, which is a big deal in terms of surrounding him with as much talent as possible. He's still in a contract for 4 more seasons. Actually, his last year on his contract, he's only a $23 million contract hit or a cap hit. And by then, you're going to see guys like, like Baker, Wentz, they're going to be making 38. Patrick Mahomes, $40 million. So when you look at Matthew Stafford at that point making half of that, it's going to be a big deal in terms of this team's ability to surround Stafford with a lot more talent. So down the road, I do look at this team as a team that can continue to build here and maybe get Matthew Stafford that ring on a team-friendly contract in several years. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but I did want to bring up that contract. Behind him, it's Tom Savage and David Fales. Nothing worth talking about there. No offense to those guys, but if anything happened to Stafford, the season's done. So 13th at quarterback. Then at running back, it is an interesting room here. They do come in 20th here. Got to start with Kerryon Johnson. He has all of the makings of a 3-down back. Coming out of Auburn, a little bit of a tough player to evaluate because they effectively used him as a wildcat power back. He didn't get to show off a lot of these receiving skills, the high-end speed. He lost a ton of weight in the pre-draft process. He was down to like 205, which kind of confused me. And then when he got in Detroit, they had him put about 10 of those pounds back on, and now he's in this healthy medium where you're at 5'11", 215. That's kind of the sweet spot for a versatile 3-down back. If he can stay healthy, I do think, if everything can go right here, we could have Kerryon Johnson in the conversation for a top 10 running back by the end of the year. He really did show some nice explosion there. And when he went down, this offense simply was not the same, which, you can't really say that about a lot of running backs, to be honest. It's usually, next man up, just kind of rinse, repeat at running back. But this team really did struggle. Now, a lot of that was because their depth was terrible. They had Zach Zenner and LeGarrette Blount, who do not deserve carries in the NFL. I'm sorry, Zach Zenner, if it's not a goal line situation, I'm not giving you the football. After Kerryon Johnson, you've got Theo Riddick, still a very prominent receiving 3rd-down back, super shifty, maybe even a little underrated as a runner. They did also sign C.J. Anderson. As long as those first two are healthy, I don't see C.J. Anderson getting the ball out a lot outside of maybe goal line work. It just, you've got 2 more explosive options that can do everything you need ahead of him, but he does offer better depth for if you had an injury, so you don't have to go back to like a LeGarrette Blount or Zach Zenner, who is still on this roster. They also draft Ty Johnson in the 6th round. I'm not going to sit here and say they found anything there. I didn't really have much on him. We'll see. And then you've got Nick Bodden. Got to mention him as a fullback. Don't always mention fullbacks, but I actually thought he was a relevant fullback for whatever that's worth coming out. He contributed to some very good run games there at San Diego State. And they actually ended up converting a linebacker to fullback last year when Nick Bodden, I think it was a torn ACL. He didn't play last year. So they are holding out for Nick Bodden coming off an injury to be a relevant piece of this offense and could be a very good piece in the run game as a blocker. So running back, they come in 20th. And then at wide receiver, they rank 11th for me. This is certainly an upgrade from last year, and a lot of that centers around the addition of TJ Hawkinson that we'll talk about in just a second. But as far as the receiver is concerned, Kenny Golladay, this is going to remain as one of the 10 best draft calls of mine on this channel. I had him as a borderline first-round pick, the same grade as Mike Williams, almost exactly. A lot of people at the time thought he was a 5th-round pick. Detroit jumped the gun, took him in the 3rd round. And ever since has been very relevant. His physical comparison is AJ Green. He hasn't shown the consistency enough yet in his young career to be in that same conversation with a tier 1 wide receiver, but I think there is a very good chance that he can get into that conversation if this offense can have some more consistency as a whole this year. And he has, like we kind of mentioned, given Matthew Stafford that security blanket again that I don't think he's really had since Calvin Johnson retired. So I am a huge Kenny Golladay fan. I expect him to really continue to emerge this year and get into that true number 1 elite conversation, frankly. And then the number 2 wide receiver here is Marvin Jones. He is now going to be able to re-enter that role as a true number 2 wide receiver, a very specific deep threat role here for Marvin Jones. Now he's getting up there in age and he might just be, on the downtrend of his career, but back in 2016, he was really clicking with Stafford, a very high contested catch rate. That's why we saw some drop off in his play. That's a number that you usually see a drop off in. If you're just coming down with those 50-50 balls, eventually you're going to regress to the mean if you want to get analytical here. But a very good number 2 wide receiver nonetheless. Really like his fit in this Seattle scheme that is going to be implemented here. Darrell Bevell coming over here from Seattle to be the offensive coordinator here in Detroit. So Marvin Jones going to take to the Jermaine Kearse role, the Paul Richardson role as the deep threat number 2 wide receiver in this offense. And this team did actually sign Jermaine Kearse, if anything happened to Marvin Jones, to play the Jermaine Kearse role. But I do think Marvin Jones still more talent than Kearse at this point in his career. Then you got Danny Amendola as the slot guy. I think Stafford did miss having that slot weapon. They did low-key trade away Golden Tate in the middle of last season. I think that hurt Matthew Stafford last year. Well, now he's going to have an offseason with a new wide receiver there in the slot. Should have that role covered if Amendola can stay healthy. That is a very big if, and I frankly would expect that he does get hurt and they're going to have to change some things up because you don't really have a great slot option. After that, it's like Tommy Lee Lewis, Brandon Powell, Andy Jones, Travis Fulgham, Chris Lacey, Brandon Riley. No one I'm really pointing to that I have any confidence in stepping up if and frankly when Danny Amendola gets hurt. So we'll see how that plays out. And then at tight end, we mentioned TJ Hawkinson, and he's going to be an X factor here. What I mean by that is he's going to be a pivotal point for this team because they've got a pretty solid defense here. But if they can get a top 15 offense here to support that defense, because I don't know if they'll be elite in either regard, TJ Hawkinson being that second big mismatch problem here next to Kenny Golladay is what could set this offense over the top. Coming out here a top 10 draft pick, you can certainly make an argument for him being the best tight end prospect to ever come out. There's some great prospects out there, but I do think you got to throw TJ Hawkinson's name into that conversation. Now, we have seen a lot of these guys be slow in their first year. OJ Howard was a fantastic prospect. I loved him coming out. Is now one of the better tight ends in the NFL, but has taken some time to get there. His rookie year was awful. Same thing can be said about Eric Ebron for this very Lions team. So there's no guarantee that rookie tight end can be that big impact right away. Even like Travis Kelce, George Kittle, they took a little time to emerge as these really good tight ends. Granted, they weren't early draft picks. So we'll see what he can offer as a rookie. And that's what I mean by him being an X-factor pivot point for this team. I do have high expectations for his career, but if he took a slower start, I'm not going to hold it against him because tight end is a tough position to learn. You got to learn blocking schemes and route running. Then after him, you got Jesse James. Glad they drafted a tight end because he's fine. He's a red zone threat and an okay blocker. Like, he's fine as a tight end too. I loved the Isaac Nata pick in the 7th round. Never going to be a guy that really gets a lot of recognition, but going to be a really good special teamer and a good blocking tight end as your 3rd option. Thought he was a fantastic pick in the 7th round because most of those guys end up getting cut, and I think Isaac Nata could be a quote-unquote franchise player in a different light, in that he could be on this, an impact for this franchise for 8 to 10 years. Then you also have Logan Thomas, a converted college quarterback, has had his time in the sun in Buffalo. He'll probably make this team as the 4th tight end. Also, Jerome Cunningham probably not going to make it. So the wide receiver room as a whole, including the tight ends, comes in 11th. Certainly an upgrade from last year with the Hawkinson addition and getting back to being more of a strength for this offense. Then the offensive line going to come in 17th. This has been a offensive line really over the last 3 years that you look at on paper and say, oh, that's a top 10 offensive line. And then it never shows itself on the field. You've got the tackle duo that should be one of the better ones in the NFL, but Taylor Decker really hasn't developed much or really come into his own as a 1st-round pick in 2016. You got Ricky Wagner, known as Wick Wagner, on this channel. They gave him a bunch of money to be a franchise right tackle. He's just been fine. So, it's not a liability at tackle, but it hasn't really helped this team out a ton. Frank Ragnow was a 1st-round pick last year. You could make an argument that he was overdrafted. Good player, but has not really lived up to that hype. Again, as a 1st-round pick in his 1st year, we'll see how he does in his 2nd year. Graham Glasgow at center. He's actually, overperformed, I would say, as a 3rd-round pick. He's a very good center. Probably going to earn a nice contract extension here. And then TJ Lang going to, get cut / retire here. Right guard is definitely dragging this thing down a little more too, because is it Kenny Wiggins? Is it Joe Dahl? Is it Ode Abushi? Leo Kalamatang? Bo Benchowel, a converted rookie tight end? I don't know who's going to be starting at right guard here, but if that turns into a turnstile, it's going to hurt this team in the end. And then they also you have to mention Tyrell Crosby here. He was a 5th-round pick at tackle out of Oregon last year. I thought he should have been a 2nd or 3rd-round pick. They might see him as the long-term replacement for Wick Wagner at right tackle. So the offensive line's fine. It comes in 17th. It's one of those units that's going to not necessarily help them do what they want to do, but also not get in their way. It's going to help this offense exist, but it's not really going to be a strength, I would not say. So the offense as a whole is going to come in here 17th. So I am projecting them to break into being a top 20 offense. Again, the X factor here kind of being TJ Hawkinson, and how much can he open up this offense? Can he be this team's George Kittle or Travis Kelce in the 1st year? I do think he has that upside on his career, but history would tell us that rookie tight end takes a little bit of time to get going. So we'll see, but you got to admit, the future looking pretty bright here with Stafford's contract, his age, with Hawkinson and Kenny Golladay being young, Kerryon Johnson. Hopefully everything from center to left tackle on the offensive line continues to develop together. A bunch of young players on this offense who can hopefully lead to more of a boost in the culture and confidence and ability to develop these players here in the 2nd year of this new Lions regime. So then we got to transition to the defensive side of the ball, which we already mentioned has already kind of kickstarted that growth and culture that really came on in the last 6 games of last season. Now, they do only come in 19th for defense. That's probably the floor for this team. There are some questions on this defense, despite some really nice things here as well. And the other thing is, the whole Belichickian scheme has been kind of an anomaly in the perception that pass rush is very important. So it could just be an outlier in the calculations here. Detroit's defense, despite ranking 19th here, is very good. So let's start with the run defense here, where they come in 4th. Now, again, we don't put a lot of weight in run defense, but Detroit has shown that with their scheme, the way they just kind of control the line of scrimmage and play good second and third level defense can work. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with the Belichickian scheme kind of being an outlier here, because traditionally you need to get after the quarterback and play good coverage, and it doesn't really matter how you stop the run. But Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia have kind of proved that wrong, being kind of an outlier in that conversation. But anyway, Damon Harrison here certainly makes a pretty damn good argument for being the best run defender in the NFL. Great move, trading a 5th-round pick to get him. Now, the only problem with him is he just doesn't get after the quarterback very much, so he's not very much of an impact in the pass rush. And he's one of the more unique players in the NFL because he actually doesn't get a ton of push, but his ability to just kind of almost stand up, bench press you, and hand fight and find the football and make a tackle, it's incredibly unique for a defensive tackle. So he is going to be the front runner for this run defense. But then you also have A'Shawn Robinson, a fantastic nose tackle, Deshaun Hand on the interior there. And I had to tweet this out because I'm sure the Lions fans are going to be back at me again with Deshaun Hand playing edge for this defense is going to be Trey Flowers and Deshaun Hand on the edge, and we're going to get after the quarterback with this elite edge rushing duo. I can't take this anymore. Deshaun Hand is an interior defensive lineman. He played 503 snaps last year of defense. 16 of those were as an edge rusher. It just drives me insane. Yes, he is a defensive end. In 3-4, it's a multiple defense. He plays defensive end, which is a 3 technique. That's an interior defensive lineman. Let's get this straight, people. He might shade inside the tackle in a base defense if they're spreading their defensive line out. But he is not an edge player. So let's get that through your thick skulls, Lions fans. Your starting edge opposite of Trey Flowers here will be either Devin Kennard or Romeo Okwara. All right, now that conversation is done, back to the rest of this D-line. The depth is whatever. You got John Atkins, Darius Kilgo, PJ Johnson, a 7th-round pick. These guys just aren't going to play a lot because you've got that incredible interior rotation with Hand, Robinson, and Harrison. Now, Hand is going to play inside on 3rd down, and he had a dominant rookie season as a 4th-round pick. He gained a bunch of weight, really came into his own, almost like, dare I say, Quinnen Williams style. Like, if you remember his story at Alabama, where Deshaun Hand is from, he was playing at like 275 as more of that edge player. You know, Deshaun Hand at 275 might have been an edge rusher. Well, he's 300 pounds now. He's not an edge guy anymore. That's the same thing that happened with Quinnen Williams, where after his sophomore year, he gained a bunch of weight and just dominated on the inside. That's kind of what they have in Deshaun Hand, to be honest. He's a very athletic dude and projects as a future star of this defense. So keep an eye on what he's able to do as a pass rusher, also in run defense on the inside. And it's going to make having to say goodbye to Damon Harrison here pretty quickly, I would think, with his contract coming up and him getting up in age. It's going to make saying goodbye to him a lot easier when Deshaun Hand is looking like a future star. So the run defense, like we said, very, very good. They've got linebackers and secondary guys here that can play the run as well, but it all starts with the interior there. So now we talk about the pass rush here. And we just went on that rant about Deshaun Hand, who will play a factor here, but this is a very multiple scheme, the Belichickian defense. You know, they'll come out in a 3-3-5 odd. They'll come up in a 3-3 stack. They'll come out in a traditional 4-2, a 2-4. They're going to come at you in a lot of different angles. They mix in a bunch of different players. It's very tricky to kind of tell where the pass rush is coming from or if it's even coming at all, because a lot of times in this scheme, they'll just send 3 and just dominate you with their coverage scheme. So it's a very particular, unique defense that's kind of hard to break down. But a big factor in what the Patriots were able to do last year was Trey Flowers and his versatility as a run defender and as a pile driver and as an edge speed rusher. He is a very flexible, unique player and a great add for this team. Would I have paid him $18-19 million? Maybe. They don't have a ton of players to pay right now, so it was probably fine. That's probably an overpay in terms of what he is worth to a normal defense, but he is going to really be a boost to this defense that was Make no mistake about it, the worst pass rush in the NFL last year. That will not be the case this year, but it is still going to be a bit of a weakness coming in here tied for 27th. So it's kind of like what we said about the Bills receivers in our last deep dive. You're going from very much last to now still not great, but much more relevant. So Trey Flowers obviously going to be a big boost there. It's all going to start with him boosting what you get here. And then Deshaun Hand, in my opinion, is the second best pass rusher here. That's coming from the interior. A'Shaun Robinson, Damon Harrison, these guys aren't factors in the pass rush, in my opinion. They're more run-stopping nose tackles. And then you got Romeo Okwara. A lot of Lions fans believe in him. They picked him up off of waivers from the Giants. I don't know. I think that's a pretty big weakness as your number 2 edge rusher. I will stand by that Rashawn Gary would have been an excellent pick here. Now, TJ Hawkinson's a great player. I'm not going to drone on about this, but they definitely needed that boost on the edge. They got it in Trey Flowers, but you still, I don't really trust Romeo Okwara to consistently get you that pass rush, and it's a big thing that's keeping this defense outside of, frankly, like the top 10 or the top 15 is against elite quarterbacks. This defense very well could still get picked apart if you can't get after the quarterback. And Trey Flowers is very good, but we're not talking about like a Khalil Mack-sized addition here to this pass rush. After Okwara on the edge, you've got Austin Bryant, a 4th-round pick. He is kind of a run-defending, first-down edge rusher. He definitely fits the mold of your Belichickian defensive end. They're a little oversized. They tend to be less physically talented as pass rushers, but maybe a little more disciplined. So he was kind of that 5th man in the rotation at Clemson. He's going to play that same role here in Detroit. It should be a seamless transition, and I expect him to make an impact on this defense as a rookie, but definitely kind of a high floor, low ceiling type of player there. You got Eric Lee. He's kind of been here with Matt Patricia for the last few years, going back to his Patriot days. Gotta mention Malik Carney, really good undrafted free agent pickup here. My comparison for him was Lorenzo Alexander, so a perfect fit here in this multiple scheme. He can play some outside linebacker as an off-ball coverage guy. He can come in and blitz over the middle. He can line up with his hand in the dirt as a defensive end, as a true outside linebacker edge. I think he's going to come in here and compete. I had a very, very similar grade on Malik Carney as I did on Austin Bryant, who they took in the 4th round. So I think Carney is a guy that could really thrive in this scheme and carve his role into this defense. And then you also have to talk about Devin Kennard, who is kind of an off-ball, kind of an edge player. He's a very poor man's version of Donta Hightower there in New England. It is actually remarkable how much Matt Patricia has said we are going to replicate the Patriots defense. I mean, it makes sense because that's what he knows and that's what he does well, and it works. But he's done a really good job, I think, of bringing in these versatile front 7 pieces that everyone's just kind of a do-it-all, and that's why this is probably pretty hard to follow what I'm talking about right now, but that's what he does to offensive coordinators, Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia. It's just kind of mind-numbing, all of the movement here in this multiple scheme, and you love the versatility. So that's the run defense and the pass rush. As far as the linebackers are concerned, your starters are technically, I would say, Gerard Davis and Christian Jones. Davis, a 1st-round pick in 2017. Serious inconsistency questions there. He has got to figure it out, or he's going to be the next Darren Lee, who's just that athletic 1st-round pick that just didn't really figure it out. Maybe he can really come into it here in year 2 in this defense. We'll see. The scheme just might be a little too complex for him, to be honest. Christian Jones was an undrafted pickup from Chicago. Another tangent here. I'm sorry if this is hard to follow, but what has made the Patriots so great? Picking up random-ass people that nobody thought would ever get another chance and turning them into starting caliber, high starting caliber players. Guys like Kyle Van Noy, for example. That's what they've done here with guys like Devin Kennard, Christian Jones. Both of these guys had positive impacts on this team last year. They're both big, fast, athletic, versatile linebackers that can play edge, that can play middle linebacker, go out and cover a tight end in the slot. Like, they can do a lot of different things, but they might not necessarily thrive in one specific role, but their movement around is what makes them special, and that's what they're going for with these linebackers. So those are really the first three names you got to talk about. Jelani Tavai, a second-round pick. This one was astounding to me. I had a fifth-round pick on him. He's fine. Maybe he surprises and can do what Jawan Bentley, a fifth-round pick for the Patriots, did last year before getting hurt as a guy that no one really expected to be good. I don't know. Second round was a lot to spend on this guy that I did not see anyone taking before then. He's a very specific player for this kind of Belichickian scheme. He's a very big, versatile dude, but I don't know, man. I don't see him as a strength in coverage. He's not particularly good against the run. That seemed to me like a bit of a wasted pick and something I didn't really get behind. You got Steve Longa, Garrett Dooley, Jalen Reeves-Maben. These guys are going to compete. And then Trey Lamar, another undrafted pickup. I had a higher grade on him than Jelani Tavai. They took in the second round. Oversized, thumping linebacker, could play on base defenses as a run stopper. I would not want him on the field covering in any sort of third down situation, though. But we'll see if he makes the team. So at linebacker, they come in tied for 23rd. You wouldn't look at this team on paper and say they've got a lot going on at linebacker, but they do have some nice depth here, and because of this scheme, these guys are probably going to outperform their name value. And you also hope Jarrad Davis can really take a step up and reach that first round potential. And then the secondary, this is very good here, and this is, again, following the Belichickian trend of we're going to spend a lot of money on corner. We're going to draft corners. We are going to sign a bunch of corners because injuries pop up. We can create different mismatches with different players. They got a bunch of different kinds of players here, but it all starts with Darius Slay, who is this team's Stephon Gilmore. He's a top 3 corner, in my opinion. Quite frankly, could be the most underrated player in the NFL. And is clearly a player that I think a lot of and is boosting this secondary grade up as the secondary is going to come in 10th. But then, like we said, a lot of depth at corner. It's probably going to be Rashaan Melvin for the most part as the number 2 corner, a good pickup from Oakland. He's a fine number 2 corner. There's nothing really special about him, but he's a pro. He's not going to be a liability here. And then they signed Justin Coleman in the nickel. Now, when I see guys like Brian Poole getting paid almost nothing to play nickel for the Jets, I kind of question the contract they gave Justin Coleman, but I don't, I'm not going to be against paying a nickel corner a bunch of money because it's a very important position, and he's a great player here in that nickel position. But then you got a bunch of depth. They took Amani Oruwariye in the 5th round. I had a 2nd round grade on him. Maybe questions about his health, but he might compete on the outside there with Rashaan Melvin to be a starter on this team. You got Tease Tabor, again, a 2nd round pick, more of a physical, slower corner. Mike Ford got some playing time last year as an undrafted free agent. They still have Jamal Agnew. He's played a little bit at times in the nickel. He's probably just going to take to a special teams role here with all of the depth. And then Marcus Cooper, a veteran pickup from Chicago. Not sure he'll make the team or not. Also, Entre Cheshire, really athletic guy out of one of the San Diego schools, can't remember which, but he is going to be a bit of a long shot here, but do keep an eye on him. And then at safety, you've got Tracy Walker, probably going to take to more of a traditional free safety role, it would seem here, with the departure of Glover Quinn, which I don't necessarily consider a loss for this team because Quinn was just kind of slow and washed up at this point, and he still hasn't been picked up. I think it's an indication that he's kind of done. So that could actually be an upgrade in terms of the range. At free safety, Tracy Walker really came on, a 3rd round pick last year that proved to be a pretty good pick for them. Excited to see what he offers in year 2. Can he kind of be a Kevin Byard type of breakout as a 3rd round pick? He's got very similar traits and attributes, so we'll see what he has to offer. As of right now, just a starting caliber guy with upside. And then Quandre Diggs, a very good nickel defender. Is he a corner? Is he a strong safety? It doesn't really matter. That lingo, it's all really the same. But he's a very smart physical, cover guy in the nickel, just a good player. Not elite, but a very good player. They also have Tavon Wilson, who's like a poor man's Quandre Diggs. They took Will Harris in the 3rd round. That really surprised me. That leads me to think that they don't think Tracy Walker is as good as some of us and Lions fans might think. He's fine. I don't see where he plays, and that's a 3rd round pick that you could have spent on another position that you might have needed more. So I didn't really understand that pick, to be completely honest. They must really want a lot of depth here in the secondary. You also have Andrew Adams. He's started games in the NFL. Miles Killebrew, he is kind of a disappointment at this point. I don't really think he's going to make this team, to be honest. So many names in the secondary. Only Darius Slay is elite, but you got 5 or 6 other guys that you're comfortable starting and moving around and matching up. So a very good secondary here. I kind of poked fun of them on Twitter a couple months ago. Didn't earn a lot of favors with Lions fans, but they really are in the conversation for the best secondary in the NFC North that has a lot of good secondaries with Minnesota, Chicago, and who knows what Green Bay is going to look like with a lot of young players there, but in theory should be better. So very good secondary there, coming in 10th. Again, the defense as a whole going to come in at 19th. That, again, is kind of the floor here. If they continue to develop this culture, if you get some emerging breakouts, if you will, from guys like Jarrad Davis, maybe Tracy Walker, those could be key pieces that help this defense take another step forward. I do think there are some weaknesses on this team at linebacker from a coverage standpoint and at the pass rush that are going to drag this thing down. The defensive coaching culture, though, tied for 13th. I think very highly of what Matt Patricia has been able to do in just 1 year here in Detroit. So let's flip over and talk about the schedule here. Any kind of optimism I've shared about Detroit here is over. Just look at the first 5 games. I mean, are you kidding me? Can you have asked for a worse start? You got to go to Arizona, Kyler Murray's rookie debut. I did put a question mark next to that. Maybe they can get that done, but that is much easier said than done. That's not going to be an easy game for them. Then they've got the Chargers at home. They have at Philadelphia. Then they have to play the Chiefs. So, those are 3 of the best teams in the NFL right there. And then you got to go to Lambeau. They've won 1 game there in like 3 decades. So I've got them starting 0-5. That's just a miserable start. We've had some tough schedules, but God, that is just awful. And, it's a good team, but I don't know if it's a team that's going to rally from an 0-5 start, you know what I mean? So then you got to play the Vikings at home. That's not easy. The first 6 games are legitimate playoff contenders. Then you get the Giants at home. Like, couldn't they have gotten the Giants at home in between that stretch? Like, geez. So beating the Giants at home, I've got them 2-5 at that point. Maybe you get a little momentum at Oakland. And then you got to go to Chicago. Home against Dallas, at Washington. Chicago again, at Minnesota. Oof. I'm sorry, Detroit. Just a bad draw of a schedule. You wrap up with Tampa Bay at home, at Denver, Green Bay at home. But at that point, I don't think they're going to be relevant enough for you to even care who they play. So I've got them going 5-11. They're a much better team than a 5-win team, and we've had teams ranked below them with better records than this. But just an awful draw on the schedule. So I'm going under for Detroit. I don't know if I would necessarily make that bet, but I mean 7 seems like, with this schedule, a pretty optimistic outlook. Win range of 4-9. I'm sorry. I like this Lions team. No one's going to look forward to playing them, but it's a team that at the end of the day, I have a very, very hard time seeing them making the playoffs. They play in the hardest division in the NFL, most likely, and they have a really tough schedule outside of that division as well. So I've got them at 7 wins. Hit me up in the comments, NFL fans, Lions fans. Let me know what you think. Too high, too low for this team? Again, please hit that like button. Until next time, cheers as always. Peace out.